Welcome, my name is John Finch. I'm the director of Florida's Able United program, and I just want to take this opportunity to thank you in advance to learn more about this newer state program. It's been around for 5 years. I've been the director of it since it has launched. Prior to that, I spent about 10 years in the intellectual and developmental disability community field, serving at the ARC of Florida, where I was able to do a lot of different things, but my chief goal was to set up a statewide dental program to provide emergency dental care for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. The goal of today is for you to learn about everything Able United, but just the elevator pitch for those that are tuning in. Able United is the state of Florida's Able program. It's been around for 5 years, but the chief goal of it is to allow individuals to save for a variety of qualified disability expenses without impacting their eligibility for Medicaid, supplemental security income, or other benefit-related resources, and then use those funds at a time they need to help pay for a variety of expenditures. So we're going to get into it, and this kind of just outlines the agenda of what we're going to talk about today. We'll cover the history of the ABLE legislation, how it came about, why it's here, and how it exists here in the state of Florida. We'll talk specifically about how the program is set up here in the state of Florida, who manages it, who provides the oversight. We'll discuss who's eligible to enroll in an ABLE account and the benefits of those accounts, how it works alongside how it works with public benefit programs, which is one of those key advantages. Often these accounts are kind of compared to special needs trusts, so we'll kind of dive into what those differences are, talk very high level about special needs trust and how they work together, and then we'll talk about the future, recent legislative ABLE changes, as well as future legislation that's coming down the pipe that's hopefully going to impact who can be eligible for an ABLE account and really broaden it to a wider audience. And then we'll finally finish with frequently asked questions. So let's talk about the history and legislation, and we really can't start with that without talking about its roots 15 years ago, when families were sitting around a dining room table and were wondering why there wasn't a way to start saving for their child with a significant disability without impacting their future eligibility for government benefits. So through the hard work of parents and advocates, the ABLE legislation came to be. It stands for Achieving a Better Life Experience, and it passed in 2014. And basically it added a new section to the Internal Revenue Code, Section 529A. And what it allowed was states to create these tax-advantaged savings and investment accounts with the unique ability without impacting government benefits. And so high level, it encourages individuals to save after-tax dollars. Those dollars can grow tax-free and be used to help pay anything related to their health, independence, or quality of life. So as we go through this presentation, as you think of what ABLE accounts are similar to, they're kind of like 529 college savings accounts, maybe if it's a regular checking or savings account or a health savings account, and a special needs trust. So it's kind of a variety of different financial products that currently exist rolled into one with some unique benefits. And as I said, each state had to set up their own ABLE program. So I'm specifically going to be talking about the state of Florida's ABLE program, but each ABLE program, as they get set up, they're kind of administratively housed differently, they're set up and run differently, but there are a lot of similarities because we all are following the same federal legislation that passed. And so those other similarities is how we all have to pass state legislation to enact. We all have to follow the same federal legislation, so that 529 and any regulations that deal with the 529A code. And then also, typically, most states have set these programs to be run under the same entity that runs the college savings programs for that state. Here in the state of Florida, which we'll talk about, is under Florida Prepaid College Board. And then most all of them do have online enrollment. So that's primarily how individuals go to enroll, interact with their account. It's all done online. Now those differences, you're going to see fees. Florida's unique in how we set up our fee structure, which we'll talk about, but that's going to be the big differences. Also, who can enroll? State of Florida is limited to the state of Florida residents at the time they apply, but other programs are set up for national enrollment or even regional enrollment. Also, your investment lineups are going to be different between state programs, and who's running the back end. So here in the state of Florida, we'll talk about someday administration, but other programs might be run by banks or other types of entities. So, but we're going to specifically be talking about ABLE programs, so as it relates to the state of Florida. So how we're set up here in the state of Florida is we are, we had to get the legislation passed to be able to offer these, and so that took place in 2015. It created Florida ABLE, doing business as ABLE United. That's the statutory name is Florida ABLE, Inc. And basically, it's a direct support organization of the Florida Prepaid College Board, and they were housed to administer this state ABLE program. So if you're familiar with Florida Prepaid, Florida 529 College Savings Plans, that same state agency is also running this new program. So we're a smaller state agency. There's only about 20 of us, but we see over $15 billion in investments for Floridians saving for college, higher education expenses, as well as now disability savings. There's also a foundation that helps at-risk students get scholarships to help go to college. And so that state statute kind of dictates how Florida ABLE is set up. It's a nonprofit board, and that board consists of appointees from several individuals. One, it's chaired by the same Florida Prepaid College Board chairman, but the House, Senate, and as well as the governor's office also appoints a member to the Florida ABLE board that high level just oversees the program, but the state employees, myself included, run the day-to-day program and work with vendors across the state to offer this product. Florida Prepaid also could appoint additional individuals. So that's high level how ABLE is structured here in the state of Florida. But ultimately, the goal of this program is to really serve the Florida community, disability community. And here's just a couple of pictures of individuals we've served. This one on the top left you see is Jen Secor and her son Sean. They were foundational in getting the federal legislation passed. They were the first ABLE account holders here in the state of Florida. And Jen's story is, she started this process when Sean was 3. He's now 18. And so it took several years to finally get to where we are now. But you can see that these are a variety of individuals that are really saving for future needs. And it could be everyday needs, or it could be stuff that they need later down the road. But it allows family and friends to be able to now help their friend, help their family member without impacting their future. So now we're going to switch over to digging into the eligibility, who's eligible to open an ABLE account. Really what's unique is most other programs have to follow this same legislation, and it's enacted in their state law based on federal law. But the individuals eligible for an ABLE account, first they have to have an onset of a disability prior to the age 26. So the diagnosis had to occur prior to age 26. Doesn't matter their age now. We have people that are in their 90s that have an ABLE account, as well as newborns. So really, it's a gamut of individuals who age-wise, but as long as that diagnosis occurred prior to age 26. And they also have to have a severe disability. And so either A, they're on supplemental security income, Social Security disability insurance, or maybe survivor benefits from parents who have a work history. Those are automatic qualifiers on the severity of the disability. For those individuals that do not have those government benefits, they do have to have a diagnosis from a physician. It does have to have what they call marked and severe functional limitations. That's a Social Security terminology, basically meaning they have to meet the requirements of the child standard, regardless of age. And that disability is supposed to occur, beyond 12 months. So that's an important thing to know. We have an eligibility wizard on our website, ableunited.com, that kind of provides some guidance if somebody has a question. And we also have a physician form. So if somebody doesn't know, they could take this form to their doctor and get that diagnosis locked down. We won't ever ask for it, but the IRS could. It's also important to know that Florida's ABLE program, ABLE United, is limited to Florida residents at the time they apply. They can move it out of the state and take it with them, but we always encourage individuals to look at their state's ABLE program because there might be unique benefits to those residents. Also, is unique compared to other financial products. As an individual, the beneficiary of the ABLE account can only have one ABLE account nationwide. So Unlike, call it like savings accounts or checking accounts where you can have multiple, you are limited to one ABLE account. And so when I talk about the severity of the disability and the age, it's a very broad spectrum of individuals who qualify. So my background in intellectual developmental disabilities, yeah, those are the two first categories, but you can look beyond that and see, okay, nervous disorders such as blindness, deafness, muscular dystrophy, different types of psychiatric diagnoses, schizophrenia, major depressive disorder, even bipolar, congenital anomalies. So if you think of Down syndrome, for example, cystic fibrosis, and there's even a catch-all category, other. And so it's much broader than just types of disabilities that individuals are diagnosed at an early age or at birth. It is disabilities that could occur later in life. And we'll talk about hopefully future legislation that will up the age and actually broaden the types of disabilities that qualify for ABLE accounts. As mentioned, this little picture over here is our eligibility wizard on the right side. That someone can go on website and within a few questions can get a guidance on if they qualify for an ABLE account or not. Now we're going to talk about who owns the account. So we know who's eligible, but who actually owns the funds that go into the ABLE account, and that's also unique. It is the individual with the disability. This is their money. They are the owner of the account. Now we know not in every situation someone's able to manage their ABLE account. That could be a minor child, or it could be an individual who chooses not to or doesn't have the capacity to manage an ABLE account. So if you think of guardians, for example, most likely would be the ones to oversee these accounts. And it makes clear that those types of individuals can enroll and maintain the account on behalf of the beneficiary, a parent, legal guardian, somebody with the power of attorney. We're expanding this based on final regulations for ABLE to include organizational Social Security representative payees. So we work with a handful of organizations that have 20, 30 plus clients that they serve as that representative payee. They can be set up to establish the accounts on behalf of those clients they serve. And hopefully this will expand to include grandparents, spouses, siblings, and a much broader spectrum of who could open this account. Hopefully we'll get that implemented by the end of 2021. So that's high level of who's eligible, who can maintain the account, who actually owns the ABLE account. Now we're going to switch to enrollment, how that process works, what does it look like and feel like, and where can it be done. And so it's primarily done online, although we do have an online paper application that can be printed, or if you call customer service, they'll mail it to you. And so what you're going to need is, just like if you're opening up any other financial account, we're going to need to know who you are, so that beneficiary's address, social security number, date of birth. If somebody's opening this on behalf of somebody, we're going to need your information as well for security purposes. If you're doing this on behalf of an adult, we're going to need verification that you are authorized to establish this account on their behalf, and that will need to be uploaded. And banking information, how you're going to put money into the account, so a connected checking or savings account will be needed as well. And when you do that, there is a minimum $25 contribution to get started. And we'll talk about those investment selections when you get to that process. So, but check it out. You can even just poke around by going to ableunited.com, hitting the open account button just to look and feel how it is. What's also unique is that individuals are opening it for maybe they're a guardian of several individuals. They can have one account, and when they go on, they can actually add new beneficiaries who will get a unique account, but it could be all established under one account login. So that's an important thing to know if somebody's opening it across for multiple individuals, either in their agency or the guardian self is doing it. There's a way to do that. So we talked about part of that process of uploading documentation if necessary, of identifying who you are. One thing I didn't mention is part of our verification process of identity is answering some of those questions you might have asked before if you've done an online financial product where it's, do you have a mortgage with one of these companies, or did you live at such and such address, one of these? And so you're going to select between those answers to verify your identity. If for some reason, maybe you don't have a credit history, if the beneficiary is doing it themselves and don't have a credit history, we're going to ask for documentation to be submitted. So some kind of ID, maybe as well as a Social Security card to verify that identity if those questions aren't answered correctly. But once we get through that process, we have the fun time of saying, okay, I want to put money into the account. I'm putting that minimum $25 initial contribution. Where do I get to put it? How do I want to save or invest the funds? And so we kind of broke this out into two columns here. First is we've created pre-designed portfolios. This is based on investment manager recommendations. As a state agency, we actually have vendors that help guide us in this process. So we do have an outside investment manager. And so they've kind of created a pre-designed portfolios where roughly 60% of all funds go into one of these. Conservative, moderate growth, those are based on someone's risk tolerance. If they're saving for future needs or if they're saving for tomorrow's needs, that really comes into play. Next is our individual fund options. So they can choose to say, hey, I want to do it myself. I want to do, create my own portfolio. Or if they want to choose just an FDIC product or a money market account, we have those individual options as well. It's important to know that funds, once they go into the account, those funds that are invested, they can only move around twice per calendar year. So, for example, if somebody puts it and they're in growth and they're worried that the market's going to go down, they want to move it over to money market account, they can do that. That would be one reinvestment or what they call rebalance, and you're only allowed one more for that calendar year, and that resets every calendar year. And so guardians, you have to decide on, for the client's benefit, where those funds go. Really depends on how involved the client is in making those decisions, or if you want to be either very risk averse and put something in the FDIC product with limited returns, or do you want to put it in something conservative that has the potential to grow or even moderate growth? So really, but all that information, the individual fund options, how those, what they're tied to, they are tied to Vanguard and BlackRock. We also have a Florida Prime account, but all those, the details of those information, as well as performance of each of those funds, is available on our website. And so when somebody gets to the investment options slide, they're going to get all of these 8 options in a row, or actually in a big column, and they get to choose by dollar amount where they want those funds to go. Subsequent contributions to the account, you can change where you want that money to go every time you do it, so that's important to know. So contributions, so generally contributions to an ABLE account are considered completed gifts, which is great. That allows family members to put money in. It allows organizations. A person can set up a kind of a GoFundMe page, which we'll talk about here in a couple slides. But it allows individuals to put their own money or other people's money into the ABLE account. There are some rules. It is limited to $15,000 per calendar year. That's based on the gifting tax amount, so that may go up every 3 to 4 years. If individuals are working and not saving for retirement, they can use the ABLE account to contribute above that $15,000 limit. There's also opportunities to roll over college savings plans. We see a lot of individuals who they were saving for their college expenses for their kid, but the child may not go to college, so now they can put those monies over to an ABLE account and not have any kind of penalty for doing that. And then also, one of the biggest things I want to highlight is ABLE accounts shelter resources. They don't shelter income. So even if somebody's earnings are directly deposited into an ABLE account, it would still count as earnings for tax purposes, as well as counting as income for various government benefit programs. And so we'll talk about a little bit more about the public benefits here in the next section. But I wanted to highlight our gifting page. This is a great way for individuals to say, hey, I can allow friends and families to set up. It's kind of like a GoFundMe page. They create it, and then people can go online and make an ACH or debit card contribution to that person's account directly instead of mailing in a check, even though that's still allowable. All right, so money's in there, it's growing. Now somebody wants to take money out. How does that work? And so there's 3 primary mechanisms to get funds out of the account. The one is to withdraw money back to that connected bank account. So that's the easiest and fastest way. Somebody can request a check to be sent to them or to a third party. We're hopefully working on a way to make this able to do online by the end of October 2021. So hopefully that will be in place. And then finally, one of our newest features is a prepaid reloadable ABLE Visa card. And so that Visa card can be preloaded with a set amount of funds, and be used anywhere Visa is accepted. So it's a great way to allow individuals the flexibility to use their ABLE accounts without giving the keys to the entire bank, right? So it is a preloadable card, and it's great to see that because we see people use it for, going out to eat or filling up their car with gas or buying stuff online, all those things that gives people freedom to do. The great thing is, like I said, these accounts can grow, and any earnings on the account are tax-free and don't count as income as long as they're used for qualified disability expenses, which we'll talk about. And they also get to choose how they want that money to come out of that account. So as I said, there's different investment and savings options. So some people say, hey, I want to leave my investments there. I just want to take money out of the FDIC option. You have that flexibility to do that. And as always, when individuals are taking money out of the ABLE account, keep documentation as to what the purpose is and why it's a qualified disability expense. We're not going to ask, but the IRS, Social Security Administration definitely will. If someone's on supplemental security income, they're going to ask, and just why it's a qualified disability expenses for your records. So make sure you keep on to that. It will initiate a tax form. Each calendar year there's a withdrawal. So for your records to say, hey, I took a withdrawal, how much of that withdrawal was earnings, that's going to be documented to the IRS. So what are people using the funds for? And this is what I think is most unique about ABLE accounts is the section on qualified disability expenses. It's a very broad list. The Treasury actually provided 13 categories. That includes everything from basic living expenses, like if you think weekly grocery shopping. It could be used for housing expenses, so rent, mortgage, utilities, annual taxes we see get paid a lot of at ABLE accounts, including insurance. It could be used for upcoming medical appointments, transportation, education, support employment, legal fees, financial fees, anything that's going to relate to that individual and help them improve or maintain their health, independence, or quality of life is a qualified disability expense. So it's pretty great. We even see these could be used for after-death funeral expenses. So that's important to know on how these accounts can be used and the types of expenses. So it's pretty exciting as these accounts continue to grow, how people are utilizing them to really achieve some freedom and some independence. All right, so everybody wants to know, this sounds too good to be true. What are the costs associated with setting up and maintaining an ABLE account? What's unique is that ABLE United is a state of Florida run program, so we want to make this the most cost efficient and lowest price entry for an individual in the disability community here in the state of Florida. And so we actually have appropriations from the state to run this program, and so we pass off that savings to you. So there is no application fee or monthly maintenance fee. There is that minimum $25 contribution. If somebody wants paper forms to be mailed to them instead of going online and downloading them, that is $10 on an annual basis. And then that flexible optional Visa prepaid card does cost $2.50 per month if somebody's interested in that. Also, our investment options do have what they call an underlying investment administration fee tied to them. Those comes out of the performance. So usually when somebody sees their performance, it's net of these fees. But you can see it's 0.29% annualized on the high end, all the way to 0% on the FDIC option. So even if somebody has $10,000 in the account, it's less than $29 on an annual basis to keep an ABLE account. So overall, great things. I always recommend individuals that are looking at this to check out online the performance and kind of come up with a plan on what somebody's going to be saving for or investing in. So that was a lot. I'm going to take a sip of water because it was that much. But that hopefully gets a better understanding and the groundwork of how you enroll, who manages this account, just what to expect when you go through enrollment. I did want to state if you go to enroll, there is also an enrollment guide that we have available that kind of runs through this list in a little more detail. So if somebody is interested, they can go to our website and download it as well. Now we're going to switch to talk about public benefits, and the reason why is one of the key advantages of an ABLE account is it allows eligible individuals to maintain their eligibility for government benefits in regards to resource limits. So resource limits, high level, because I'm going to say that quite a few times through here. Most public benefit programs restrict how much assets somebody can have on hand. And typically it's around $2,000, depending on the type of program. So $2,000 is really not a lot. But the great thing is this funds generally in the ABLE account are disregarded as a resource. So they don't count towards that $2,000 limit. First one we're going to talk about is Medicaid. So if you're familiar with Medicaid, it's a federal and state program, helps individuals pay for a variety of expenditures. Primarily the individuals we serve fall into two kind of categories outside of just the state Medicaid health plan, which is kind of like a government health plan. There's also the Medicaid I-budget waiver administered by the Agency for Persons with Disabilities, as well as long-term care. Basically, those help individuals maintain stay in the community, provides support, but they does require some limitations on how much money they can have, $2,000. Generally, funds in the ABLE account or even taken out of the ABLE account are disregarded as an eligibility, so it shelters those resources. Remember, it doesn't shelter income, it shelters resources. Recent federal legislation, because one of the questions we get is what happens if the beneficiary passes away? Does the state just take all the money? And the answer is no. Generally, what would happen if an individual passes, any leftover funds after all outstanding qualified disability expenses are paid would go to the estate of the beneficiary. Now, there is Medicaid estate recovery, so if they're over the age of 55 and don't have a spouse or a child with a significant disability they're caring for, the state may file a claim on that estate. So it's an important thing to know of how to utilize these funds, but typically it would go to the estate of the beneficiary and be used based on probate and how the estate is distributed. The next big program that we see, about 40% of people that have an ABLE account state that they have or are receiving supplemental security income. So that's a small check, $815 a month or so, that helps pay for basic living expenses, food, housing, clothing. There are some additional rules. Generally, funds in the ABLE account are withdrawn or disregarded. The first $100,000 in the ABLE account doesn't count towards that $2,000 resource limit. So, of course, you know, if you're putting $15,000 per year, it's going to take 5 to 6 years, depending on how the markets do, to get above that. But that's an important thing to keep in mind if you're on SSI and you're worried about counting as a resource. And we have some examples we're going to go through. Also, housing expenses, although they are allowable, if those housing expenses, the funds taken out of the ABLE account, are maintained or retained, I should say, after the end of the month, they would count as a resource. So make sure those fees are paid in the same month. And then also, we always encourage individuals to check out the online manual that Social Security makes available for individuals on SSI. They have a really good breakdown of how they treat ABLE accounts and provide some really concrete examples. And as part of the requirement on the federal level, we have to submit monthly to Social Security all ABLE account transactions and balances, so they know ahead of time if somebody's on SSI and has ABLE, and then if you make withdrawals, what those funds are used for. So we're going to give a couple examples, and the one thing that I think attorneys love a lot is using ABLE accounts to pay for housing expenses. So here's an example of Amy. She has $500. She takes it out of her ABLE account in May, and she plans on paying her rent or landlord or whatever in June. She keeps it, so she takes the money out in May, keeps it until June 3rd. She cuts a check or pays for those utility bills. Well, guess what? Even though it's a qualified expense, it's a housing-related expense, that money will count towards that $2,000 resource month for the month of June. So how do you prevent that from happening? Right? We don't want somebody to jeopardize their benefits because they paid for housing. And so how you can do that is either withdraw and pay in the same month, or just have the ABLE account pay those housing expenses directly so the money never touches the beneficiary. This is great because it's going to avoid in-kind support maintenance, which would reduce the SSI benefit by 1/3. So that's a significant amount of money that can be saved by just having the ABLE account pay it directly or spending it in the same month. And that's an example of housing specific. So that's the same Social Security rules, whether it be utilities or the insurance or other housing-related fees, rent, mortgage payments, etc. The other example I wanted to give you was that $100,000 limit. So that's another one of those rules. Generally, ABLE accounts are disregarded up to the first $100,000, only for SSI recipients. Those that are not worried about SSI, these accounts actually get to $418,000. So significant amount of savings into an ABLE account. And so what happened, here's the example of Paul. He has $101,000 in his ABLE account, $2,500 in his checking. That's going to be over the threshold. First, they're going to look at the checking account and go, oh, it's your checking account. It's over the $2,000 limit. So now your SSI benefits are going to be suspended. Or even lost. So be careful if you're working with a guardian that has SSI, they have an ABLE account, be wary of the $100,000 limit. Just keep that and monitor it. And we're working on notifications so people will know, hey, you're getting close to that limit. So it's important to know. So those are the two biggest programs we see, but what about all the other federally means tested programs? So if you think of HUD housing, for example, if you think of Department of Education as it comes to applying for financial aid, the way that it's written is generally, unless there's other provisions of federal law, funds in an ABLE account are just disregarded when it comes to counting as a resource. And so a lot of these federal programs have put out guidance. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid stated that, hey, the money's going to be excluded. What happens if the person passes away? It goes to the estate. And here in the state of Florida, we passed laws to say that the state can't file a claim on an ABLE account. It still can file on the estate if they meet those requirements. Other federally means programs, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, they're excluding assets from ABLE. HUD housing, you can see on here, a lot of the clients and individuals you serve might receive HUD housing. They're not looking at ABLE accounts, and we're still waiting for the United States Department of Education to say, hey, what about people applying for higher education? So that was a lot. So those are the primary benefits of an ABLE account, is that tax advantage and really the ability to save and keep eligibility for government benefit programs, specifically Medicaid and SSI. So hopefully that was informative, and this information is always available on our website as well, ableunited.com, and there's a ton of resources online if there's specific questions, and we'll have contact information as well at the end. So now we're going to switch to kind of ABLE and special needs trusts, and what's unique is often ABLE accounts are kind of compared to special needs trusts, and so although I'm not an attorney, so this is just for informational purposes only, it should not be considered legal or tax advice, but it's important to know that just high level what the differences are, how they can work together. And so I put this bold statement on top: ABLE accounts are not special needs trusts. I think early on they were often kind of tied to that. Here in the state of Florida, we have a program called ABLE Trust, so people kept calling this ABLE Trust account, so we had to do a lot of correction, but we're under a totally different section of federal law and state law, but here's a kind of a comparison, because if you think of how special needs trusts are set up, they have their own U.S. code 45-1396, and ABLE is in 26, so you can see they're not even in the same section of the U.S. code. But here's just the similarities you're going to go through as we see, who can establish it, the annual contribution limits. ABLE does have that limit, but other special needs trusts don't. Medicaid payback on death. If it's somebody that's gotten an inheritance from a family member that was not planned for, so now it's in their name, or if they win the lottery or receive a settlement of some sort, that goes to a first party, and those funds, the beneficiary passes, goes directly back to the state if they're on Medicaid. But really the similarities between the two is just they be able to set money aside for whatever the future may hold and keep those government benefit programs. And so if you're working with a guardian that has a special needs trust, reach out to that attorney who has set that special needs trust up. Tell them, hey, I'm looking at establishing an ABLE account, because there's a lot of benefits of having special needs trusts fund ABLE accounts. Gives that flexibility, takes a load off of the trustee or whoever's overseeing that special needs trust, and typically there's less fees to solve as it relates to ABLE accounts. And so just things to keep in mind. And so high level, we'll talk about first-party special needs trusts, and then we'll talk about third-party special needs trusts. So first party are who owns the money, right? That's who the first party is. And there's really three different types of special needs trusts. This is if they're under the age of 65, they have unplanned inheritance, they have a significant amount of assets, but they need to qualify for Medicaid. Personal injury awards, that's one type. Qualified income trust, usually it's a trust set up that if somebody's working a lot and wants to still earn a lot but needs that Medicaid benefits, you have those. And then pooled special needs trust, basically it's pooling individuals' funds together, so not as much to set up their own trust, but can kind of have economies of scale when they bring in other individuals as well. But all of these have mandatory Medicaid payback upon death. Really, when ABLE accounts are often compared to third-party special needs trusts. So these are individuals who want to look at the welfare of their child or their family member without impacting their benefits, and usually there's planning involved ahead of time. And so these are part of estate planning. So people are like, I have a life insurance policy, I have homes or vehicles that I want to be able to leave for this child or this individual with a significant disability. And they may qualify for government benefits. I don't want those to be impacted. And so that's when third-party special needs trusts are kind of set up, remember, because they can accept non-cash assets. It does require an attorney to set up, has to be approved. There's a trustee to oversee it, and so that it's once removed from that beneficiary and typically the guardian. It can be costly to set up, and the thing I put in there is you may need to add a provision or talk to see if a provision is necessary to allow those types of trusts to fund ABLE accounts. So how are they different? Because both the special needs trust can be used for a variety of expenditures. Usually the trustee sends that money directly to whoever requests it. The beneficiary can't touch the money. It's important to know. ABLE accounts are different because the beneficiary, it's their account, it's their funds. They have the option to have access to it. It can be used to pay for housing and not reduce SSI benefits, while typically third-party special needs trust, that trustee is going to deny those requests. Funds can grow tax-free. Trust can be expensive and there can be tax consequences as well. Alignment's done free, typically online. A trustee doesn't have to set up an ABLE account. The individual can if they're capable, or a different third party. There is a restriction though on how much money can go into it. But also ABLE accounts are protected from against creditors. So that's important to know as well. Since we're kind of talking about legislation and the changes that have happened to ABLE account, because if we think ABLE accounts have only been around for 5 years, it makes sense that legislation is going to come about to kind of adjust it, to improve it, and I just want to kind of cover some of those. The first one being the ABLE Act, Work Act that passed in 2017. Basically this, as I mentioned earlier, allowed beneficiaries who are working and not saving for retirement to utilize the ABLE account as a retirement vehicle, and they can be used to actually take advantage of the Savers Credit, which could reduce their tax burden. So that's a unique feature that passed and has been implemented. Also, the ABLE Financial Planning Act, as I mentioned, college savings rollovers to ABLE accounts, that came about due to this legislation. It's important to know those types of rollovers do count towards that $15,000 limit. So if you're working with a family member, or if you're a guardian of a child that has an ABLE or has a college savings account and they're rolling it over to ABLE, if it's over $15,000, it's going to have to be done in multiple years. Also, final regulations came out 2019 in November, and what those did was, November of 2020. Those final regulations dictate how states are to run these programs. The most significant changes had to deal with who is an eligible individual to open and maintain this account. It actually kind of created a hierarchy and says, a parent can open this first, but if they're not available, then a sibling or a spouse, and it goes down from there, including Social Security representative payee. There's also some additional guidance on one account. They're going to try to be more friendly. If you open an account here in Florida, then moved out of the state and open up another ABLE account in that other state, because the state's information, depending on who their back end is, doesn't communicate, and so you could be in a situation where you could be in payback, but they provide some flexibility on how you can liquidate that second account, and so you don't jeopardize government benefits. And there's some unclear. We're still seeking guidance on some of the issues when it comes to post-death payments and Medicaid repayment and our responsibility. One of the most exciting pieces of legislation that hasn't been passed, but every year comes up since the ABLE Act passed in 2014, is the ABLE Age Adjustment Act. And I think out of all the years, 2021, it seems the most positive. But what the ABLE Age Adjustment Act would do was up the age from 26 to 46 of when that diagnosis occurred. Here in the state of Florida, that's an extra 500, 700,000 individuals that would be eligible. So a lot of those, if you think of a lot of the mental health type of diagnoses, those usually can occur after the age 26, as well as spinal cord types of injuries as well. And so we think it's gaining traction because the Congressional Budget Office in 2021 actually released an estimated cost over 10 years, which takes a lot of work to get to. So hopefully this piece of legislation will pass this year, or if not early next year, and that's going to be very exciting because just who can be eligible for an ABLE account. And so I put some of those big highlights of big wins. Psychiatric disorders. If we think of our disabled veterans, a lot of them might now be eligible for ABLE accounts, and so that's just exciting. We're covering that, and so if you haven't visited our website, please do. You can actually sign up for subscription of updates. We send out emails quite routinely, and so if this piece of legislation comes out, if you're on our email listserv, you'll be one of the first ones to know about it. So I'm going to switch now to frequently asked questions because, as you can see, if you're still with us, there's a lot of information that's been covered, a lot of details, and so usually people start having questions after the first couple of slides, and so hopefully these frequently asked questions will answer those. The first one, as mentioned, ABLE accounts are new. They are limited to one person. So what happens if they move out of the state of Florida? Do they have to close their ABLE United account and open up an ABLE account in that state? That's one of the eligibility requirements. You have to be a Florida resident at the time you apply. Doesn't matter if you move out of the state after you open it, and so you can keep it with you since it's an online program. However, check out that state's ABLE program, as there might be unique benefits to their residents. Primarily, I know several states who have a state income tax. Florida does not, but some states who have a state income tax say, hey, if you donate to your ABLE account, or family members do, they can actually write that off of their state income taxes. So that's pretty exciting. So check out what that state offers. The next thing is I put what is Someday. I haven't mentioned Someday really. But as a state of Florida, we have vendors that actually provide a lot of the benefits of ABLE accounts, whether that be the back-end record keeping, our online websites managed by a marketing firm, etc. But Someday is actually a subsidiary. The parent organization is Bank of New York Mellon. They are actually our record keeper, our customer service. So after you create an account and log in, it's actually the Someday platform you're using. And so you will interact with Someday. You'll see their name and maybe the footer, but that is who they are. They're as Bank of New York is one of the world's largest financial institutions in the world. And so we have that benefit of not only being a secure product, but having that backing of one of the world's largest financial institutions managing these accounts. And they actually oversee 20 or so other ABLE programs across the state. All right, next question. Do I have to file taxes because I have an ABLE account? You might be working with guardians who typically don't file taxes because they're not working. And so people are kind of hesitant saying, hey, I open up an ABLE account, now I'm getting tax documentation, do I have to file this? And generally, the answer is no. This is not going to cause somebody to have to file taxes generally. ABLE accounts are treated separately. You will receive a tax document for each individual who has one established. The first form is what they call 5498 QA. That's a high-level form that's just going to say how much money was put into the account, whose account is it, when did it open, who established it, what's the requirements of it being established. And then if they make a withdrawal during the calendar year, it will initiate what they call a 1099 QA. If you're familiar with 1099s, it's based on earnings or work history. What's unique about 1099 QAs is it's specific to ABLE accounts. It's going to show how much withdrawals were made that calendar year, and of those withdrawals, how much earnings was tied to it. So for example, let's say you took $1,000 out of your ABLE account this year. It could be maybe 900 of it was what they call basis, how much money you put in, and $100 is earnings. So it will break down that total withdrawal to earnings and basis. And as long as the account was used correctly, or if you had at least $1,000 in qualified disability expenses for the year, which is pretty broad. We've heard of people using it for vacation and buying groceries and just living life. Those are all qualified expenses. But as long as you have that, there's no need to file taxes. However, if you have no qualified disability expenses for that year, there is taxable on the earnings portion. So in the example I gave, the $1,000, $100 could be taxable income based on that person's tax rate, which once again, if the beneficiary is not working, it's going to be almost zero. So, and there could be a penalty on that. But generally, no, ABLE accounts aren't taxable. It doesn't require somebody to file taxes, but there will be tax forms created for that. And the last one, I mentioned this a couple times throughout the presentation, but what happens to the funds in an ABLE account if a beneficiary passes away? Usually, death of beneficiary, please alert us, let us know. We usually put a freeze on the account so no additional contributions could go in. Outstanding contributions or outstanding withdrawals can still happen. Additional withdrawals to help pay for funeral and burial costs can happen. But usually we tell, hey, there's an online form, a death beneficiary form that can be filed so we know who's responsible for liquidating that account. And usually it ends up going to the estate of that beneficiary. And as long as we know who the personal representative of that estate is, we can do that. And so then from there, the estate, and depending on what happens to the estate, it will go through probate and whatever that process looks like. That's important things to know when creating, establishing an ABLE account, how it's going to impact and what the benefits are long term. Finally, to reach, this is a lot of information. If you want a one-off presentation or if you have specific questions relating to ABLE accounts, I want to leave our contact information. The first place definitely is our website, ableunited.com. Has a ton of resources. It actually has a professional resources landing page that gives you a little more the technical side and provides that guidance and information. We even have a Spanish landing page as well. And so if you have questions, customer service can be reached. We have live chat on our website as well. We have an event calendar. We're in the process of redoing it, but it's a very robust event calendar, but also includes office hours where you can reach to me directly, set up a time to meet. Typically, those are Tuesday to Thursday, 11 to 2. But we can have a one-off conversation, or you can shoot me an email as well. And then our phone number there, 888-524-ABLE, Monday through Friday, 9 to 6 Eastern Time. And I will leave my email address specifically. It's johnjohn.finch, F-I-N-C-H, @ableunited.com. You can always reach out to FSGA, and they will have my contact information as well. And hopefully you can see the benefits of an ABLE account. But thank you all for sticking through this, and hopefully you learned tons about Florida's ABLE program, Able United, and we hope that if it applies to the guardians that you serve, that you can help them achieve a better life experience. Thank you.